Hi, and welcome to another story. If you're enjoying Dob Entertainment and want even more, then check out my Patreon channel, patreon.com/James Dobinson. Link in the description. There you'll find full audiobooks for Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Lord of the Rings, Roald Dahl, David Walliams, and many more being added all the time. Thanks for your support as always. Let's get into the story. Hi, and welcome to another story. And today we have part 3 of Animalcolm by David Baddiel, continuing from chapter 18, So Cat. Okay, said Zaza, so you're a boy? Yes, said Malcolm. And now you're a cat? Yes. So what's the problem? Pardon? Zaza scratched her ear with her back foot, quite hard, like she was banging her head against her toes, and then said, Well, that's an improvement, isn't it? Well, I don't know. You're prettier, you're cleverer. You get to sleep 23 hours a day. And poo outdoors, said Benny. Yes, that too. What's not to love about being a cat? Malcolm was about to say, No, you don't understand. I don't even like animals. So can you imagine what it's like suddenly being one? But stopped himself. Not just because that might have sounded rude, but because for a minute, for a second, he thought, actually, she might have a point. He felt how taut and streamlined his body was. He remembered that jump down from the roof. He realised that he was, in a way, having fun. So instead he said, Well, not everything's great about being a cat. Name one thing that isn't, said Zaza. Malcolm thought about something Ticky and Tacky did at home. Weirdly, it gave him a bit of pang, thinking about home and his own family's cats, even if he didn't like them. Well, he said, have you by any chance found inside the farmhouse a lovely small pond, surrounded by white slopes? Oh, yes, said Zaza. It's in the room where Gavin and Maven bathe. Malcolm smiled to himself. And do you sometimes balance yourself on those slopes and then bend your face right down to drink water from that lovely pond? Yes, said Zaza. It's a toilet. It's a human toilet. Zaza didn't say anything for a moment. Thought the water tasted a bit, tangy. She licked herself. Oh well. Obviously not even making it clear that she'd drunk gallons of toilet water was going to dent Zaza's love of being a cat. So Malcolm said, Anyway, I think what I should do, at least to try and find out what's happened, is go and speak to K-Pax. The goat? Yes. What's he got to do with it? Malcolm realised he hadn't actually explained to Zaza how he'd ended up like this, so he did. Said Zaza after he'd finished. Sounds a bit, far-fetched. Well, said Malcolm, yes. Oh, that's so typical, said Bjornita. So cat. What did the tortoise say, said Zaza. Said Malcolm. Spit it out. She, said that's so typical... So, cat. Zaza narrowed her eyes at Bjornita. I beg your pardon? You being so cynical and disbelieving about it, said Bjornita. That's very cat. Zaza looked at Malcolm. Reluctantly, Malcolm translated. Oh, right, said Zaza, as opposed to being all... She went close to Bjornita and screwed up her face to look stupid. Duh, about it. That's very tortoise. Translate, please, Malcolm. Malcolm chose not to do this. Instead, he said, Listen, I think we're getting away from the problem, which is, my problem, mainly, because I would like to get back to being a boy at some point. He took a deep breath, trying to control the fear that saying this brought up to him. So, does anyone speak goat? Trotsky and Benny and Bjornita and Zaza shook their heads. Okay, said Malcolm, but I've got an idea anyway. Let's go to the goat pen. Why? Said Benny. I think, said Malcolm, that the way this works is when I fall asleep, I change into another animal. I think into the last animal I saw. That's what happened just now. I saw Zaza on the roof just before I went to sleep, and when I woke up, I was a cat. So, if I get into the goat pen, I could fall asleep, and then I'll wake up as a goat, and then I could speak to K-Pax. There was a short pause while the other animals took in this quite long speech, and then Bjornita said, Splendid idea. Good one, said Benny. Me think it sounds good, said Trotsky. Yes, good. Okay, said Zaza, let's go. Yeah, said Benny, let's go. What did he say? Said Zaza as she ran off, followed closely by Trotsky and Malcolm. Never mind, said Malcolm, looking back at Benny and Bjornita, already a long way behind. Chapter 19. Hey Boy. When they got to the goat pen, Zaza jumped gracefully up and sat on the edge of the fence. Malcolm followed her. It was so easy to land there, it was amazing. Trotsky made more of a meal of it, scrabbling up with his tongue hanging out, and then he wasn't able to perch on the fence, so just fell off onto the earth on the other side, which made most of the goats back away. Malcolm looked at Trotsky and felt superior, which was odd. When he was a boy, he wouldn't have felt that a cat was better than a dog or any other animal. He wouldn't have cared either way, but as a cat, he definitely felt he was better than a dog or any other animal. So, said Zaza, which one is K-Pax? Malcolm looked at the goats, still all backing away from Trotsky, who was just wagging his tail at them. And then, behind all the others, he saw those eyes, those amber, staring eyes. That one, he said, the really old-looking one at the back. OK, well, go to sleep. Right, just like that. Well, if you're right, you'll turn into a goat. Then you can talk to K-Pax. Yes, Malcolm was suddenly a bit frightened about this. He had felt at some level quite at home with being a cat. Being a goat, that seemed more alien. Then again, he had already been a tortoise. So he jumped down into the pen. The ground was muddy, covered in hay and straw. The goats were all staring at him. It didn't feel like the easiest place to sleep, even if he was a cat, the best animal at sleeping in the world. But then Trotsky came over and said, "Perhaps this will help." He curled his body round Malcolm, like a warm furry, all over body pillow, and within seconds Malcolm felt himself falling asleep. Just before Malcolm actually dropped off, however, he heard the gate of the goat pen open, and some voices. "Gav." "Yes, Mav?" "They'll be all right in here, won't they? Then they'll be in place all ready for the show tomorrow morning." "Yeah, only... Look, oh look, here's Trotsky. Cuddling some cat. Who is that cat?" "Don't know. Looks really like Zaza, but she's back at the farmhouse eating. Hey, Trot. Hey, boy. Where have you been? We needed you to help move all the But by then, Malcolm was asleep. Chapter 20. The Dollies. Wake up, everybody. It's time to wake up. How many times do I have to say it? Wakey, wakey. Malcolm did as he was told. He woke up. The person speaking was shouting very, very loudly and repeatedly in front of him, and also a cockerel. Said Malcolm, blinking. How come I can speak cockerel? Every animal speaks cockerel. We all have to, because we all have to know what time to get up. It's vital. The cockerel stuck his face closer to Malcolm's. Wake up! Malcolm looked at the cockerel, who was puffing his chest out and shaking his weird gibbly under chin bits and his red punk washing up glove hairdo with the effort of telling Malcolm to wake up. I'm awake, said Malcolm, deadpan. The cockerel looked at him suspiciously. OK, he said, and turned away. Wake up! No one else in here is asleep, said a voice. Certainly not any more, said another voice. Good. Wake up! Malcolm looked up at the sky. It was a new day, a nice day. The sun was shining and the sky, visible above the fence of the goat pen, was blue. He felt refreshed by his sleep, and the plan had clearly worked. He looked down at his feet, which were hooved. He scratched his head on the floor and could feel that he had little horns, and the smell rising from him was it was very stinky blinky. He looked around for K-Pax. Yes, he was still there, in the same place, behind a couple of other goats. Great, thought Malcolm. I can get him to reverse the spell, and then I'll be a boy again. Malcolm trotted, over towards the area of the pen. He wondered how to approach this. At first he thought perhaps he would just speak to K-Pax gently, in order to coax him out of the way, back to being a human. But as the other goats parted, and he got closer and closer, he became angrier. If indeed this whole thing was K-Pax's doing, what right did the old goat have to change him into a variety of different animals? It wasn't fair to inflict that on someone else, just because Malcolm had said he didn't like animals. Never mind being gentle, Malcolm was going to tell him off. As his grandpa liked to say, he was going to give him what for. Finally, he had the goat in his sights. K-Pax was right in front of him. Malcolm saw once again the staring amber eyes that had, he was sure now, caused this whole animal thing. Malcolm opened his mouth and said loudly, ba 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 ba. Then a short pause, and then ba. Malcolm thought he was saying, Oi, look here, K-Pax, or whatever your name is. What do you think you're doing, turning boys into animals, eh? But if you'd been a human, and there at the time, you'd definitely have heard ba 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 ba, and then ba. Which might explain why K-Pax just stared at him, and also why Malcolm was suddenly surrounded by 3 sheep. Hello, 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 they said. Sorry, what's going on, said Malcolm. That's what we were wondering, said the first one. Why are you shouting at that goat? He doesn't understand sheep. He doesn't. Not sheep, said the second one. Not a word of sheep. Bah is all he hears, said the third one. Malcolm shut his eyes and took a deep breath. So, you're telling me that I'm a sheep? He said with his eyes closed. Yes, they all said together. What's your name? Said sheep 1. Malcolm opened his eyes. Malcolm, what's yours? Dolly, replied sheep 1. I'm also Dolly. I'm Dolly too. Right, sorry. I thought this was the goat pen. It is, said Dolly 1, but our field's being dug up, so Gavin and Maven put us in here for the night. When they led you in here, did you notice a sleeping cat? Not Zaza, another one? No. Yes. Dolly 1 and Dolly 2 looked at Dolly 3. That's odd, said Dolly 1. Yes, said Dolly 2. We always agree with each other, usually. Yes, replied Dolly 1. I agree with you, and you agree with me, and we agree with her. Yes, said Dolly 3. I agree with you. I do normally agree with you. Agreed, said Dolly 1, 2, and 3. Malcolm closed his eyes again. He thought he could feel a headache coming on. He tried to rub his head with his hand, but then he remembered that he didn't have a hand, he had a hoof, and that it was very difficult for a sheep to raise a single hoof to its head for a rub. So, said Dolly 3, I know this is weird. Weird, said Dolly 2. Yes, weird, said Dolly 1. But even though you two didn't see the cat, I did. This seemed to completely stump Dolly. I had Dolly 1 and Dolly 2. Even, in fact, Dolly 3, who was saying it, so she added, Maybe I imagined it. Yes, I agree, said Dolly 1. So do I, said Dolly 2. And me, said Dolly 3, sounding very relieved. Anyway, said Malcolm, do any of you speak goat? And they all shook their heads. Isn't it very similar to sheep, said Malcolm. I mean, it sounds quite similar, like, I don't know. A very faint memory came back to him of something they had learned in school, Spanish and Italian. No, said Dolly 1. We goats bray. Bah, said Dolly 2. Not bray, said Dolly 3. Right, said Malcolm. Got it. Thanks, but can't we try, though? No, don't think so. Not possible, said the 3 sheep. Thought Malcolm, suddenly having an idea. Really, he said, even though I'd like to do it, and I'm a sheep, and sheep always agree with each other. The dollies looked at each other. Okay, they said in unison. Chapter 21, Goaty McGoatface. So the 4 sheep began to trot over together to confront K-Pax, who seemed to be waiting for them, in exactly the same place as before. Suddenly, the way to the old goat was blocked by a ring of other goats, who surrounded him like armed guards. Stop! Sheep, said one of the goats, in a very big, important voice. Go no further. Oh, goat and sheep is quite similar then, said Dolly 1. Yes, more similar than I realised, said Dolly 2. Almost exactly the same, said Dolly 3. Hello, said Malcolm. What is your name? Goaty McGoatface, said the goat. Really, said Malcolm. Yes, it is apparently a very dignified and proper name for a goat, according to Gavin and Maven. Malcolm did his best not to laugh, which apparently wasn't that difficult, as sheep can't. What is your purpose with K-Pax, said Goaty McGoatface, in an even bigger and more important voice. I just want to know why he changed me into an animal, said Malcolm. The circle of goats closed tighter around K-Pax, muttering to each other in small noises that Malcolm couldn't understand, possibly because they were speaking in a goaty dialect that wasn't very sheepy. And then Goaty McGoatface said, big, important, etc. K-Pax does not speak. Yes, I do, said a voice from inside the circle of goats. It was quite an old man's voice, a little bit like Grandpa Theo's, only with a bit of goaty vibrato in it. What was that? Said Malcolm. Nothing, said Goaty McGoatface. Nothing, said the other goats in the circle. As I was saying, Goaty Mc continued, K-Pax is the great, silent goat. His wisdom is that of the ancients and cannot be passed on by words. No, it's okay, said the voice again. I'm up for a chat. Malcolm stared at Goaty. That was K-Pax, he said. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Yeah, it was me. Hello, Malcolm, said the voice. It was muffled, coming as it did from behind the tight circle of goats. Hello, K-Pax. Why won't your goat friends let me talk to you? Said Malcolm loudly, trying to raise his head above the goats, which wasn't easy as they had horns as well. I know, said K-Pax, trying to peer through the ring of goats surrounding him. It's annoying. They think it makes me more mysterious and magical and stuff if I don't speak. Can you hear something? Said Goaty McGoatface, bigly, importantly. No, said another goat. Well, I can hear the sheep speaking. Apart from that, nothing. Why do they want you to be more mysterious? Said Malcolm. I don't know. Not a lot happens in this goat pen, to be honest, so when something magical does go on, they like to make it as glamorous as possible. Anyway, how's it going? What? Being an animal. How are you finding it? How am I finding it? Thought Malcolm. Like K-Pax was asking him how about having a new pair of shoes, or being in a different class at school. Oh, it's fine, said Malcolm sarcastically. Super. Unfortunately, animals, well, except for cats, obviously, do not understand sarcasm. Oh, good, said K-Pax. I knew it was what you wanted from what you said. To understand animals, you have to live as an animal. No, said Malcolm. Wait a minute. Just remember, K-Pax continued with some deepness in his voice. When the cockerel has crowed 3 times, the spell will be over. When the cockerel has crowed 3 times, said Malcolm. Do you mean after 3 days? Yes, suppose so. Think it sounds better to say when the cockerel has crowed 3 times, though sounds more, spell-ish. Oh, good, said Malcolm. So I'll be a boy again in 3 days. Well, he thought, that's not too bad. No, said K-Pax. When the cockerel has crowed 3 times, you will transform into whatever animal you wake up with that morning. So on the 3rd night, time's up. You have to decide which animal you want to be, and then all you have to do is get close to that animal and go to sleep near it. And when you wake up, you'll be that one forever. That's how you'll become what you're meant to be. Oh, I knew you'd come to love animals once you were one. If Malcolm had still been a boy, his face would have turned white. Being as he was a sheep, it was just white, but inside, it turned whiter. Only make sure that it's an animal you really like, K-Pax was continuing. An animal you love, preferably, and who loves you. Sorry, said Malcolm. Did you say forever? Wakey, wakey! Malcolm turned away from the goat throng. The cockerel was passing by the outside of the goat pen, still on a mission to destroy sleep on Orwell Farm, which made something very clear to Malcolm. Horribly clear. But I've already had one day and night. OK, said K-Pax. 2 days left. So get weaving. Weaving? With those animal choices. Got to make sure you choose the right one. Malcolm gulped. It is reversible. Is what reversible? The spell. The being an animal thing. Why would you want that? Said K-Pax, still from behind a wall of other goats, who were all looking around pretending they couldn't hear him. Because I don't want to be an animal. I never wanted to be an animal. I want to be a boy again. Suddenly K-Pax did actually fall silent. K-Pax? The great Lord K-Pax, as I have told you, sheep does not speak, intoned Goaty McGoatface. That just isn't true, is it, Goaty? I was just speaking to him. No, you weren't, said K-Pax. That's him now, said Malcolm, saying I wasn't. Well then, said Goaty, clearly you weren't. What? How can I not have been speaking to him when he just spoke to me to tell me I wasn't speaking to him? Doesn't make any sense. And neither, my friend, do you. Now, if you wouldn't mind backing away from the goat. Nothing to see here. Malcolm had a feeling he knew what had happened. Why K-Pax wasn't speaking to him. Because when Malcolm asked if the spell was reversible, it was clear that Malcolm hadn't really wanted to be an animal at all, and K-Pax didn't want to admit to having made a mistake. None of which was going to help Malcolm to become a boy again. OK, thought Malcolm. These goats clearly won't listen to reason. Time to use brute force. And the fact that sheep always do what other sheep do. Dollies, he said, turning to them. Follow me. OK, OK, OK. Malcolm put his head down, ready to charge the goats. Each of the dollies did the same. Goaty McGoatface tensed. There was a distant squeal that may or may not have been K-Pax. And then suddenly the door opened and 4 large men, Malcolm had never seen before, wearing aprons, came into the pen. Round their chests were straps, leading to long leather bags, from which Malcolm had seen poking out what looked like very long and sharp knives. Get the sheep, shouted one of the men. Dollies 1, 2 and 3 stopped facing the goats and just turned and ran. So did Malcolm, who suddenly found he really wanted to do what the other sheep did. Chapter 22, Blades at the Ready. But it was too late. Malcolm saw Dolly 1, Dolly 2 and Dolly 3 caught by the men. It looked very rough. 3 of the men grabbed the sheep by their back legs and swung them upside down. Before he knew it, the 4th man, a very large man indeed, had got Malcolm's legs and swung him upside down. And yes, it was very rough. The man carried him over his shoulder to the other side of the pen. Malcolm could see the points of his various knives glinting in the no longer nice at all sunlight. Help! Shouted Malcolm. Help! Help! Yes, shouted Dolly 1. Help! Help! Shouted Dolly 2. Help! 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 Shouted Dolly 3. Hi, said Gavin, suddenly coming into the pen. Hi, said Maven, also suddenly coming into the pen. Oh, thank heavens, said Malcolm. Gavin, Maven, they'll stop all this. Hello there, sir and madam, said the man who was carrying Malcolm. Sorry the sheep be making such a noise today. No worries, said Gavin. No need to call us sir and madam, though, Eli. Right you are, sir and madam. Everything sorted, said Maven. Blades at the ready, said Gavin. Yes, sir and madam, said man called Eli. Oh no, shouted Malcolm. Gavin, Maven, please. Mr. Barrington, said Gavin. We're here. Malcolm heard Mr. Barrington's voice. What? Everybody, children, this way. Malcolm felt himself swung back over the man's shoulder and onto the ground. The man was holding him down. It hurt. He could see the same thing was happening to the dollies. Meanwhile, along the top edge of the fence, he could suddenly also see the faces of Fred, Ellie, Barry, Lucas, Jake, Taj, Isla, Morris, and all the rest of his year. Mr. Barrington raised a hand for silence. OK, all of you, Gavin and Maven have very kindly organised today's event, so watch closely. Mr. Barrington? Yes, Ellie. Should we watch closely where the sheep are, or the way you're facing? Oh, sorry, I see now that those are just some fluffy clouds. No, look over here. They all turned to look into the pen. Of course, thought Malcolm. We're here, on a farm. What happens on a farm? What happens to the animals? I can't believe it. I can't believe it's going to end this way, with all my year watching. He looked up and screamed. Barry, Fred, Ellie, Lucas, Mr. Barrington, sir. I'm not a sheep. I don't want to be chops or stew. Save me! Save me! Ha ha, bah, said Morris. That sheep is going bah at us. Yes, said Isla with a sigh. That's what they do. Oh no, thought Malcolm. It was no good. He was just doing a lot of mad baaing. It was pointless. Malcolm felt very, very sad. He closed his eyes. And then, with his free hand, the one that wasn't holding Malcolm down, the man called Eli reached into his leather bag. Chapter 23. Run, run, run. Malcolm's eyes were still closed. He may have closed them tighter when he heard a strange noise, sort of like a very, very buzzy fly. He wondered if maybe, to save his life, he had a last-minute transformation into a very, very buzzy fly. But then he opened his eyes and saw his hooves and Mr. Barrington squinting at him and realised that no, he was still a sheep. He wasn't, though, dead. What he was a bit colder around the bottom area than he had been before, and also wanting to laugh because he was being tickled around the bottom area. Ha 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 ha! Stop it, he said. Shh, said Eli. God, this one's acting like he's never been sheared before. Malcolm looked around. Using electric shears, Eli was shaving off the wool on his back. Every so often, where there were knots, Eli would cut them off with a knife from the leather bag. Malcolm tried to stop laughing, but not only did it tickle, it felt completely silly that huge clods of wool were coming off him. It was like he was a very cosy version of Spider-Man, whose body produced not steel-like threads of silk for enmeshing supervillains, but balls for grannies to knit with. And then, to make it worse, Eli turned Malcolm over and started to do his tummy. That one's got a funny bah, he heard Barry Bennett say, above his own laughing. Yes, said his friend Lucas, it sounds more like bah than bah. Finally it was over, and Eli let him go. Malcolm and the dolly stood up among their shorn wool. It looked like the goat pen had been overlaid with very badly made shag pile carpet. So there you are, boys and girls, said Gavin. That's how you shear a sheep. There was a round of applause, which felt odd to Malcolm. He had never thought about applauding his dad after watching him shave. Ah, that's better, said Dolly 1. Yes, much better, said Dolly 2. Better all round, said Dolly 3. I think it's cold and a bit embarrassing, said Malcolm. Yes, that's right, cold and embarrassing, said Dolly 1. Embarrassing and cold, said Dolly 2. Freezing, said Dolly 3, and quite humiliating. Also, said Malcolm, why were you shouting help earlier? You must have known it was only a shearing. The dollies looked at him blankly. We were shouting help because you were shouting help, said Dolly 1. Yes, because you were. Yes, all right, said Malcolm, sighing. I get it. Now, said Maven, let's take the sheep back to their field. Suddenly, over the goat pen fence bounded Trotsky. As soon as they saw the dog, Dolly 1, Dolly 2 and Dolly 3 ran towards the gate, which was opened by Eli, and then they carried on running. Malcolm watched them go. He was starting to have had enough of the whole sheep thing. That's odd, said Eli. That one sheep don't seem very bothered by the dog. Woof, 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 said Trotsky, nudging at Malcolm's back. Malcolm shook his head. OK, children, said Gavin. Perhaps you can help us get this sheep out of here. Next thing Malcolm knew, he was surrounded by his own classmates, cheering and whooping and going, Come on, sheepy, wake up, lambkin, and where's your wool coat gone? Where's your wool coat gone? So, just to get away from them, Morris Fawcett was being particularly annoying, poking him on his newly shorn rump. Malcolm ran out of the goat pen and after the dollies, and then his year ran out of the goat pen and chased him. After a few minutes, Barry and Lucas and Taj and Fred and Ellie had caught up with Malcolm. They were all laughing and joking and giggling as they ran. It made Malcolm feel envious and a bit sad that they were having such a lot of fun and he wasn't. He was just running. Barry, said Malcolm, while still running. Lucas, Taj, Fred, Ellie, it's me, Malcolm. This one's really funny, said Lucas. He just keeps baaing as he runs. Yes, and he's looking right at us, said Fred, like he's actually trying to tell us something. I am trying to tell you something, said Malcolm. Ah, said Taj, imitating him, which made them all laugh. And then they ran off back towards the farmhouse, leaving the sheep far behind. Malcolm carried on running and caught up with the dollies. He trotted along with them in the middle of a big field. Where are we going? He said. We're running away, said Dolly 1. Away, running, said Dolly 2. Far, 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 said Dolly 3. But the kids chasing us, they caught up with us already. Now, in fact, they're just running in front of us. Look, there's Barry and Lucas and Taj, and Fred and Ellie and all the rest of them about 50 metres ahead. We have to run, said Dolly 1. Run, 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 said Dolly 2. But it looks like we're chasing them now. Keep going, said Dolly 3. They might catch up. They have caught up. Onward, said Dolly 1. It was at that point that Malcolm stopped starting to have had enough with the whole sheep thing. He finished having had enough with the whole sheep thing. He stopped, let the dollies run on, and just settled down in the field to go to sleep. Chapter 24. Brill Poo. Mr. Braden, said Jackie, opening the door from the reception area to the surgery. Rodney? What is it? I'm examining a gerbil. I know. I've got a very unusual condition. Only by extreme focus and concentration can I restore it to health. I thought he'd eaten a crayon, said Jackie. A purple one. It has. Is that an unusual condition? If I show you the x-rays, Jackie, you'll see that his insides have gone purple. His tiny gerbil bladder actually has a drawing on it of a purple house and some purple clouds. Was what Jackie Bailey was thinking? But she didn't say it, as Rodney Braden, the vet, was her boss and someone who took his veterinary work very, very seriously. So she just let him waffle on about how the x-rays showed some toxic effects on the gerbil's tummy. Obviously he didn't say tummy, he said intestines, until finally he took a breath. Yes, of course, Rodney. I realise you're very busy doing extremely delicate work with Gandhi. Who's Gandhi? The gerbil. Rodney looked down at the tiny creature anaesthetised in front of him, as if surprised that, beyond being a collection of organs, it had a name. I know him, continued Jackie. He's Janesh's, Mr. and Mrs. Blashkar's son's gerbil. They live 2 doors down from us. Right, well, as I say, Jackie, I'm very busy. The operation is at an absolutely crucial stage. Yes, I was just wondering if I could use the landline to make a personal call to my son at this farm, this school trip he's on. My mobile's run out of power. Of course. If you weren't so mean, she thought, I wouldn't have had to come in and ask that. She watched the vet frown, caught, she knew, between 2 opposing instincts. 1, wanting to say no, as it cost money, and 2, wanting to say yes, whatever, just go away, so that he could carry on being the great and serious vet. At that point, while the vet was frowning, Gandhi's tiny body twitched. It might just have been a purple crayony burp, but it was enough to make up Rodney Braden's mind. Yes, whatever, he said, waving her away. Gavin was just cutting the stinky blinky when the farmhouse phone rang, which might explain why no one heard it at first, as almost everyone in the room was going, and ah, and my eyes are watering. But Maven, who was smiling and licking her lips, picked it up. Hi, said Maven. Hello. Sorry, I was going to call Mr. Barrington's mobile, but the reception wasn't very good last time, so I thought I'd call the farmhouse landline. Anyway, sorry, it's Jackie Bailey, Malcolm's mother. Cool. Jackie wasn't sure what to say to that, so she said, yes, thanks. Anyway, is Malcolm there? Wait a minute, said Maven. Gavin. Hey, Maven, said Gavin, handing her a plate. The blinky's just so stinky tonight. You gotta try it. OK. Maven took a large slice and held it in front of her mouth. Sorry, hello, said Jackie. I was wondering about Malcolm. Oh, yeah, soz. She put the phone down and addressed the dining room. Is Malcolm here? Malcolm Bailey? Well, that's what Maven was trying to say. Unfortunately, she chose to put the big piece of stinky blinky in her mouth first, and so it came out as, Malcolm Bailey, which very few of the children heard above their own shouts of, and now also, I'm going to be sick. Soz, said Maven, I ain't going to be peeing like out the thing about the animals. I beg your pardon, said Jackie. Maven did a big, and to be honest, even though she always said how much she liked it, quite forced, she closed her eyes and screwed up her face anyway, swallow. Oh, blimey, she said, taking a long breath. Soz again. I said, I think he might be still outside playing with the animals. Which was at least true. At that point, at the vet's, Rodney reappeared. He came out of the surgery holding Gandhi the gerbil in one hand and a half-digested purple crayon in the other. Despite the obvious success of the operation, he, Rodney, was looking cross. Gandhi, to be honest, was looking just a bit bemused. Jackie knew why this was. She'd been on the phone too long. OK, well, send him my love when he comes in, said Jackie, hurriedly putting the phone down. So hurriedly, in fact, she didn't hear Maven say, Brill poo, which was her way of saying, will do, with her mouth full of more stinky blinky. Chapter 25. A lovely name. Malcolm had been hoping, on waking, to be a horse. That was his plan. As he had been running across the field with the sheep, he'd noticed a group of horses in the next field. That was why, apart from having had enough of being a sheep, he'd chosen that spot to go to sleep in. He wanted to be a horse, not just because he thought being a horse might be great, proud and dignified and strong and fast and not sheep-like, but also because he had an idea. If he was a horse, he could get back home. He didn't exactly know the way, and he didn't exactly know, when he got there, how he was going to communicate to his mum and dad that he was not just any old horse come off the street and into their house, but was in fact their son Malcolm. He decided, however, not to worry about that just yet. He was sure that somehow Stuart and Jackie would recognise him and sort everything out. They didn't, it was true, have a lot of practical experience with goat spells, but they were his mum and dad, and they would know what to do, he hoped. On waking, though, he was also fairly sure that once again he hadn't ended up as the animal he'd planned, because he wasn't cantering majestically through the fields, tossing his mane in the wind. No, rather, he was lying face down in some mud. He seemed to actually be breathing in mud. He tried to get up, but just slipped and sank further into the mud. He looked up. The sun was significantly lower in the sky than it had been when he went to sleep. The day was slipping away, and he'd turned into the wrong animal. One clue to which animal he had become this time was that even though he was now caked in mud, Malcolm seemed to really quite like the feel of all the mud. He could feel it sticking to his skin, but instead of thinking, or I must have a bath, or even like he would have done when he'd been a cat, quick, lick it off, he thought, in more or less the same tone as Homer Simpson might use if he was thinking about donuts. Mud. The other clue was that bearing down on him as he rolled around in the mud was an enormous pink 2-pin plug socket with hair coming out of it. This became a clearer clue when the enormous pink 2-pin plug socket with hair coming out of it snorted. Ah, thought Malcolm, it's not an enormous pink 2-pin plug socket with hair coming out of it. It's a nose, or, to be more exact, a snout. The snout moved backwards to reveal that it was attached to the head and body of a very large pig indeed, who was looking at him curiously. That's odd, said the pig. Ludwig? Yes, Mabel. Malcolm looked around to see another pig, even more enormous, sitting sprawling in an even muddier section of what Malcolm now realised was the pigsty. Have we had any new kids recently? Ludwig thought about this for some time, and then he let out a large grunt, which Malcolm heard as, No, I don't believe so. No, I don't think so either, but look. Look at what? Ludwig, come here. Ludwig groaned and heaved himself slowly up out of his puddle. Large globs of muddy water came off his belly, which seemed to swing in slow motion as he walked across to Malcolm. Malcolm sat up out of the mud. Well, his bottom half was still very much in the mud, but his face was out of it at least. Said Ludwig. I don't remember this one at all, especially not the blue eyes. Does he have a name? Excuse me, said Malcolm, and then he stopped. Yes, said Ludwig. Am I a pig? He said. That's a funny question, said Mabel. None of our children have ever asked that before. Yes, said Ludwig, although you could say it's a very good question. When do any of us truly become a pig? Is it when you first roll upside down with your hooves in the air while sinking in the mud? Or is it when you gobble more than 7 manky apples in a row? When you do your first really big snort, suggested Mabel. Yes, that is a key moment. Or is it something more spiritual than that? Perhaps it comes with the realization that it's very unlikely that you will ever fly. Mabel sighed and looked up at Ludwig, lovingly. Oh, Ludwig, you are a very clever pig. Some humans, Mabel, have a thing called bar mitzvah, which marks the date when you become a man. Perhaps we should have something like that. A pig mitzvah. To celebrate when a piglet becomes a pig. Malcolm decided the time had come to butt in. Yes, but they are the humans who don't like pigs. Ludwig stared at him. You say that, but what you mean is they don't eat pigs. A good thing in my book. Mabel sighed again. You're so full of wisdom, Ludwig. She turned to Malcolm. You are a lucky piglet. Your father is the cleverest of all pigs, and pigs are the cleverest of all the animals. Well, said Malcolm, if you are so full of wisdom, and not just manky apples. Rude, said Ludwig. We'll have to work on that. Mabel? Then explain why you've got me so wrong. You see, I'm not your child. I'm not a pig. I'm a human. I'm a boy human, and I have a name. Malcolm. Ludwig and Mabel exchanged glances. Well, said Ludwig, it must be awful to feel something so wrong. So first of all, we shall not call you Malcolm. It is a human name. Yes, that's because I am human. I just told you. I am trying to relieve you of that strange and painful delusion, and also of that name, which is a slightly dated one for a boy at that. I beg your pardon, said Malcolm. Well, it is, said Mabel. It's like Alan or Norman. It sounds like you're 54 and work as a regional manager for Asda. Please don't mention the human supermarket, said Ludwig. We know what products they contain. Sorry. So, said Ludwig, turning back to Malcolm, to help you restore pride in your pigginess and bring you back to loving your piggy self, we shall call you the most prized pig name of all. Right, said Malcolm wearily. And what is that? Ludwig took a deep breath and said grandly, Fatty Bum Bum. All hail Fatty Bum Bum, said Mabel. Say it loud and say it proud. Fatty Bum Bum. Please don't call me that. It's a lovely name, said Mabel. Not if you're human. Ah, but that is what you need to stop thinking about yourself. Love your pigginess. Fatty Bum Bum, love your pigginess, Fatty Bum Bum. As he said this, Ludwig began circling Malcolm and chanting it. Mabel joined in, circling and chanting. Their hooves splashed mud on Malcolm as they trotted around him, forming a circular pig wall. Love your pigginess, fatty bum bum. Love your pigginess, fatty bum bum. Love your piggy. Yeah, thing is, pigs, said a familiar drawling voice. He's right. He's not a pig. Malcolm tried to look over Mabel and Ludwig to see who was speaking, but he was too small, so he looked under them, which had its own challenges given the amount of teats Mabel had and the amount of mud, straw and bits of manky apple on Ludwig's underside. But even through all that he could see, and was mightily pleased to see, Zaza the cat sitting on the wall of the sty, licking herself, obviously. And that is where we will leave part 3 of Animalcolm by David Baddiel. I'll be back soon with the next part of this fantastic story and lots more stories and videos coming your way very soon. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.